There's lots of various ideas out there about the nature of the relationship between David and Jonathan. So what my personal opinion is that there's nothing inherently sexual of that relationship. Um, Often that's a common view, though. It's a common view that that David and Jonathan were not just friends; that they were in fact homosexual lovers. But there's nothing in the story that says that. And the Old Testament, like when the Old Testament wants to tell you that people are sexually involved, the Old Testament does it, right? The Old Testament doesn't pull any punches about when people are involved sexually. So I just get the idea that they developed a very close very close friendship, and it kind of makes sense, right? Like when if they're teenagers at the same time, and right, David is hired by Saul to play his harp, so he's spending a lot of time at the wherever it is that where Saul lives. David is spending a lot of time there. As young as right, it makes sense that they would be friends, especially if there's already tension between Saul and Jonathan, as it seems clear later on, right? Like there doesn't seem to be any love lost between the two of them.
Mm.
Take right, I would take the author meaning and saying they become one spirit, meaning that they were like, right, they were such good friends that they were like thinking and acting alike. Exactly right. It is unique. It is unique. Um, yeah, so I think it carries the idea of like they're joined at the hip, or like like you can't pull them apart, right? Like their friendship is such that there's no there's no getting in between them. I think it's kind of that. I think that's how I would take that phrase, right? This of being one spirit. There's an additional aspect of contrast there of like when Jonathan dies, what David says about him, right, is like how his love was better than that of women, right? And like that's a flaw of David, right? Like David uh I mean he is a polygamist, right? Like from very early, right? Obviously he enjoys, right? Like he enjoys relationships with women, but he says, well, this friendship is better than that. Um yeah, which is right. So like David himself is making, right, is developing a contrast. Which already, what I've just said, right? That should already, like, we should already kind of have flags, like, right? Because back in Torah, right? That's one of the things that the that Torah says a king, especially a king, is not to do, right? A king is not to marry multiple wives, right? It's explicitly forbidden for people who become kings, right? And Saul, right? Saul is he takes at least one, at least two wives, the two wives of Saul that are named. And I think there's it's either seven or eight wives that David takes. Right? It's like right, it's already in this, like, you're already in this narrative, right? We should be like starting to think David kind of seems worse than Saul, right?